Namaskara, welcome back to the channel. Today we will discuss about EGR systems. EGR is a brilliant system invented by engineers and scientists to tackle the problem of pollution, especially to reduce the NOx emissions. EGR stands for exhaust gas recirculation. That means some of the exhaust is mixed with the intake air and injected into cylinders. It might seem counterintuitive. Why are we mixing the exhaust gases with the intake?
What?
EGR directs some of the exhaust gases into the intake system and eventually enters the cylinder for combustion. You might think it's very weird that we are putting exhaust gases back to the engine, right? That is a brilliant thing that helps in reducing the NOx emission. Now let's get into the details. Now let's focus on this block diagram. This is a basic intake system, engine and exhaust system. This is common, right? Intake air entering the engine and combustion happening here, and the spent gases, that is exhaust gases, exiting through the exhaust pipe or tailpipe. But here you can see an additional system, that is the exhaust gases are redirected back to the intake system via EGR valve. Before understanding how EGR helps in reducing the NOx emission, we need to understand the gases present in the exhaust. That is, we know when the combustion happens, hydrocarbons actively react with the oxygen, producing gases such as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide and water. When the temperature is low, that is in the colder conditions, we will have more carbon based emissions, that is carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. When the temperature inside the engine and the pressure is very high, it will lead to more NOx emissions, that is nitrogen oxide based emissions. Generally, these nitrogen oxide gases, that is NOx gases, are more harmful for nature. So that's why it's very important to reduce the NOx emissions. Now let's understand the role of EGR valve. Mainly, some part of exhaust gases are routed to EGR valve, and EGR valve is controlling the flow of exhaust gases to intake air. When the exhaust gases are mixed with the intake air and the fuel, it will lead to effectively reducing quantity of the charge that is available for combustion. That is, effectively we are getting the lower output from the engine. That indirectly means when the engine is producing the lower power, the exhaust gases will be at the lower temperature. Here at the meeting point, when the exhaust gases and intake air meets, we need to understand that the exhaust gases are inert gases. That is, they are non-reactive and non-combustible gases. It will effectively reduce the amount of the charge that is available for combustion. That means the engine is producing less power at this point. Power output is directly proportional to the exhaust gases temperature. And also, since the exhaust gases already contain some concentration of carbon monoxide and nitrogen oxides, this inhibits the total net generation of these gases. As I told, nitrogen oxides form at very high temperature and high pressure. That is, the nitrogen present in the intake air and the oxygen present in the intake air reacts together at higher temperature, forms nitrogen oxides. And in the lower temperature, the formation of these oxides is less. This is another view of EGR system with intake, combustion, exhaust gases which are routed back by a EGR valve. This can be actuated by a vacuum line or electronically actuated by a solenoid or a motor. And these gases will be regulated and they'll enter back to intake system via EGR cooler. Now let's understand the types of EGR. That is, three main types. They are low pressure EGR, high pressure EGR and hybrid EGR. This is termed low pressure because the exhaust gases are mixed with intake air after the turbine. That is, after supercharger or turbocharger. And in the high pressure, the exhaust gases gets mixed with intake air before the turbine. That's why we'll have higher pressure charge that is entering the EGR cooler. That's why extra care needs to be taken in the high pressure system. That's why a robust EGR cooler is required in this position. And we also have a hybrid EGR which has advantages of these two together. That is, it has two piping or routing. That is, the ECU can choose whether it wants to run the EGR system in low pressure mode or high pressure mode. This has a better efficiency overall because it can reduce NOx at both lower load and higher loads. And we also have non-cooled EGR and cooled EGR. This is a simple classification based on whether the EGR cooler is used or not used. As the advancement in engine happened and we needed more power and lesser emissions, slowly shifted to cooled EGR, that is passing exhaust gases through EGR cooler that will lead to cool and dense exhaust gases that are entering the intake system. That's how we can extract more power out of the engine and result in lower NOx emissions. Now let's focus on advantages of using EGR. That is, first one we already discussed. We get a reduction in NOx emissions. In some of the engines, it is observed reduction of around 80 to 90% of NOx emission at a higher load. We'll also get better fuel economy. We also have one more benefit. Lower exhaust temperature help in increasing life of CAT. What? Not this CAT. Catalytic converter. Now let's understand what happens when EGR starts to fail. First thing is we'll get MIL lamp or check engine light on our dashboard. In some cases ECU might switch to limp mode, that is for protecting engine. It will limit the RPM to 2500 or 3000. This forces the user to take to service center. We'll also observe poor engine performance, that is erratic idling or rough idling, also poor acceleration performance. We will have increased NOx emissions in our MOT or emission tests. It will also lead to the knocking. This is because of increased temperature and pressure in the cylinder. We got to know advantages and symptoms of failing EGR, right? Now let's understand why EGR fails in the first place. The main reason is clogging of the EGR valves. This is a gradual process, that is, before completely failing, usually it starts clogging up, that is with soot or grime, which usually gets deposited in the valve and piping. There are several reasons for this. The main reason is improper combustion. That is, this can happen because of lower engine temperatures or user is having very short trips like 2 to 10 minutes and not allowing the engine to rise to optimum temperature. This is prominently observed in city driving condition. That is, shorter trip to school, office, college or groceries or stop and go traffic situations. It is, engine will not have opportunity to reach the optimum temperatures. This lower temperature results in increase in carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide production, which directly results in more clogging up because of soot production. There is also a term called driving like a grandma. You are treating engine very gently by shifting gears at lower RPM and slowly accelerating and slowly decelerating. This intuitively feels like you are protecting the engine by being gentle, but in reality it ends up harming the engine. This is because by doing this gentle or protective driving, the engine will need more time to reach the optimum temperatures. That means more fuel enrichments, improper combustion when the engine is cold, thus increase in the emissions. On the contrary, if you are doing a little bit of spirited driving, such as sudden acceleration and changing gears at a higher RPM near red line, this will lead to increase in exhaust temperatures, which will eventually burn off this soot or deposits on the valve and exhaust. Thus, it's recommended to do this spirited driving once in a while and do this only on highways. Finally, I would like to add few points. If you have an older diesel engine or if your rides are mostly inside the city at lower speeds, then you need to take care of the EGR system. That is, either you have to get the EGR regeneration done from the service centers or you have to do it the manual Italian tune-up. That is, doing a spirited driving and rising engine RPMs. This should be done for a brief period of time only. It is better to get the inspection of EGR valve to see the level of clogging. There is also a concept of EGR delete, that is either completely removal of this system or bypassing this system such that the exhaust gases don't enter the engine and we don't face any loss of power. This is beneficial in only few engines which are really old and produce lot of smoke. But it's just a hassle because if you do this delete, ECU needs to be recalibrated. If the calibration or tuning is not proper, you will end up with far worse results than having the EGR system in the first place. That's it from my side. If you have any doubts, please let me know. If you have learned something from this video, please like and subscribe to the channel for future videos. Hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.